Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Ask the Unfaithful. As always, I'm joined by a superhero, James Anir. And today we're talking about three warning signs the unfaithful isn't committed to the betrayed. This is a straight to the point, no nonsense podcast today. If you're an unfaithful, measure your recovery up against these three warning signs. If you're a betrayed, measure your unfaithful's recovery up against these three signs. And I assure you, everything that we do is always geared towards compassion, kindness, and respect. We're former unfaithfuls. We get it, but we're not going to shy away from presenting the truth of what recovery should look like. So, James, as we launch out today and we talk about warning signs the unfaithful isn't committed, isn't the opportunity to try and restore our relationship inherently kind of a gift that the betrayed gives us?
Absolutely. It is the second chance of all second chances. How blessed are we to be given another opportunity to build this relationship back, to stay in this partnership, right? So
Right.
it's a huge gift. And as such, it's a sacred gift. And it needs to be handled with kid gloves. This isn't, you're being handed a piece of baccarat or something very fragile that's really beautiful. You have to handle it very carefully, right? So we have to be all in. And part of that though is we're not just talking all in with our recovery, we're talking all in with our partner,
Mm.
really committed to our partner. Being all in with our partner is easy to say, but it's harder to do because we have to not only address the really obvious stuff, but we have to also address our distorted beliefs and behaviors that we don't see. And that's going to take work and time and a really strong desire.
It really, it really does. I remember a funny TV show I saw years ago where this new dad was saying, there's just no playbook on how to be a great dad. And this older, more experienced woman said, there's literally thousands of books written about how to be a good dad. And oftentimes I'll hear unfaithful say, well, there's no like do this and don't do that. And I'll say, buddy or sister, there actually is. And so today's going to be a 3 point kind of scale that if your partner who is unfaithful is doing these things in a positive light, man, great sign. The future looks not a guarantee, but it looks pretty good. If your partner is doing these things in the negative,
Right.
it should be relatively alarming. So, number one, the first thing that you said is the first warning sign is that the unfaithful partner does not respect the betrayed partner's boundary or boundaries. What does that look like, sound like? Describe that.
When we don't respect our partner's boundaries, we're breaking them, right? So that could look like pressuring for sex or not respecting our partner's time or personal space, not following agreed upon limits or parameters. That inevitably ends up with the partner feeling violated. That sounds really strong, but it's absolutely true. So we have to think of it like that. Oh, if I break this boundary, it's not a sort of a loosey-goosey, okay, well, whatever. It is really violating our partner's self. It's so
Absolutely.
important.
No, you're right. And violation is really, I think all the betrayeds would say that's not too strong at all. At some level, it might not be strong enough for some of the behavior of the unfaithful, even.
Mhm.
Some of the betrayed might say, their behavior can be abusive, demeaning, and degrading at times.
Yeah,
But the fact is, if a betrayed partner feels violated, it's just a red flag, regardless of the language. Am I right?
huge. I'm going to say this a couple of times today. It's in how you, for a partner, it's in how you feel treated for a betrayed partner. That's so vital. So that's really important for unfaithfuls to hear because, oh, we could say, but I've done all these things right. But how did you treat your partner in doing those things? Right.
Right.
Ultimately it's going to, and this is, you're going to hear this a lot today too. It's going to lead to a loss of trust and safety. What are we trying to do as the primary thing early on, especially as unfaithfuls, is trying to help our partners feel safer. And we do that by building trust, by being reliable, by doing what we say we're going to do, by caring, by being empathetic, by being compassionate. So breaking boundaries will lead to a loss of that. And that is the opposite of what we're looking to do.
Absolutely. And we're going to break it down this way today for those of you that are watching and listening. So we're going to talk about, what is the warning sign? And if you as an unfaithful are kind of like, oof, I'm doing that, or I have been doing that, or I'm guilty. You know what, Sam, James, I'm blowing it. So every warning sign that we have, we're going to have a metric or a part that says, well, what can the unfaithful do if they've been doing this? So for the unfaithful that have been violating or disrespecting boundaries, what can the unfaithful do?
Well, there's a huge reason that we do it, and that's underlying resentment. There may be people out there who go, I don't have any resentments against my partner. Well, sure you do. It's just not necessarily obvious. So you've got to look at, do I have a resentment, and what is that resentment, or what are those resentments? One of the ways we can do that is, how have I, asking myself the question, how have I acted this way before in my life? So where have I sort of flouted the rules? Where have I rebelled? Where have I been anti-authority? Where have I disrespected the gender of my partner in the past? If you can identify those, then you're going to start to anchor in on where you might be resenting, and also why. There's a bit of a key here too. We'll take boundaries as being these hard and fast rules. You will do this, you will not do that. Well, because they should, and typically do, have consequences if we break them. Okay, but what we're really they're actually requests. If you do these things, you're committed to this healthy relationship. And so if we can think of them in those terms, they're not really very unreasonable. And guess what? If we do disregard them, there are consequences, because our betrayed partner is allowed to do that. Otherwise, what's the point in having boundaries? We have to have consequences if we break those boundaries. The last thing I'm going to say, because people are going to love this, look at your issues with mom if you're male, dad if you're female, because that's going to tell you what might be coming up for me with my betrayed partner who's of that particular gender. Where I had a problem before with mom or dad, then I'm probably going to have similar problems with my partner in those. So that's where resentments can spring from.
Makes great sense.
So, all right. So I'm just going to say, what else can you do? Change it. Right? It really can be that simple. Change it. What's going on here? Why am I disrespecting this boundary? Change how I'm approaching it. Change it.
Well, there's also the reality that they can kind of write out the boundaries, right? They can put them in front of them
Yeah,
to they can ask their betrayed to say, "Hey, let's talk about your boundaries so that I can really make you feel seen and loved and heard."
absolutely. I think that's a beautiful way to do it. The listing the boundaries out lets you check your own behaviors against them, so that you're not sitting there and your partner's saying, you violated this boundary, and you're not going, what? How? We can be, I know I was pretty ignorant about things, maybe not reading the boundary the way that it really is, and doing things sort of that violate that, but I don't really realize that I'm doing it. Okay, in that case, then we need to have this check. Here's the boundary. Here's what I'm doing. Is that violating that boundary? And if I don't know, ask. Because if my partner's saying, yes, it is, okay, how is it? How is it doing that? You have to be curious about it, not saying it, well, oh yeah, really? How am I doing that then? You're going, okay, please
Right.
tell me more here, because I really need to know how I'm doing it. I'm not seeing it. I know I really want to be able to see it, but I need some help here to see what's happening so that I can stop it. Here's another key. If we're bucking the boundaries all the time, we have to change, we have to flip that script and go, okay, I'm going to embrace these boundaries. I'm going to collaborate on them. I'm going to talk with my partner about these boundaries. How might that otherwise show up? How can I make this even better for you and thus for us? This makes them, when we make that decision to embrace it and become a part of it and help collaborate on it, it makes them ours as well as our partners. And then we don't resent them.
I think it's beautiful because if we're trying to restore trust, intimacy, if we're trying to move back towards our partner, there's simple math. What's important to them needs to be important to us, and it will be evident by our actions because our only currency is our actions when it comes to restoration. So now, if there's a betrayed, and the betrayed is sitting here going, okay, well, you're telling the unfaithful, but what can the betrayed partner do when it comes to repeatedly having their boundaries violated?
So talk about them again. Up front, talk about them, make sure they're outlined well. If you need to work with somebody to get clear on those and what the consequences are going to be, then and you need to relay that very clearly. That doesn't mean you're going to cover every single angle that an unfaithful may go, oh, that's violating that boundary, but you want to be as clear as possible. You also want to be really clear about how those boundaries are going to help you. That's going to make me feel safe. If you follow this boundary, it's going to make me feel safe. And that's of utmost importance. Saying how they're going to help you also helps your unfaithful buy into those. Now you may say, oh, well, why does my unfaithful have to buy in? Just follow the boundaries. Okay, true. And I can tell you, if you get the buy-in, the likelihood of following those boundaries and treating you well is going to be much, much higher.
So what are some little examples that the betrayed might, if they're like, boundaries is new to me altogether, guys. So what are some examples?
These are kind of areas that are addressed in boundaries, need to be addressed in boundaries. Physical. So is touch okay? Right? What about sex? What about financial? Does there need to be more transparency with financial stuff? Do you need to be making decisions on financial? Does there need to be a limit on how much can be spent without talking to the other person? What about contact with each other? How much contact? How to contact? Contact with the affair partner. Well, that's going to be a boundary of no. I think we can say that very clearly. No acting out, of course. Transparency on emotional levels and other levels so that you're establishing this clear communication. Levels of emotional intimacy, interaction with people who could present a danger to your marriage and to your betrayed partner, and recovery work. So boundaries need to surround all of those things and be clear. That doesn't mean that they can't change. Often boundaries will change over time. So interaction with potential dangerous people, Sharon can handle me talking to anybody because she knows at this, well, for a long time now, she knows that I have no other desire or I'm not going to act out in any way with somebody else.
There is the element that the betrayed has to really commit to having boundaries, right? There has to be a sense of standing strong, or else the unfaithful is going to continue to trample on those boundaries. Is that safe to say?
Without a doubt, we've trampled on everything else. It's kind of the way that we've been probably in our entire lives, right?
Hmm.
So we tend to, oh, there's a rule, I'm going to break it. There's a boundary, and well, I've never met a boundary I didn't break. A partner has to be willing to enforce what they've decided that consequence or result of that boundary being broken is going to be. So, for instance, oh, if you say something that's harmful or hurtful to me, you're going to stay in the guest bedroom tonight. That could be a boundary. I'm not saying that is the boundary that everybody should pick. So be willing to stand behind it. So if the consequence is we're getting a divorce for every single thing you're making a boundary about, how are you going to be able to enforce that? You literally have to stand by it. So if you don't, it's an invitation to, oh, well, that boundary means nothing, right?
Right.
It's too porous. You have to be willing and able to enforce the result or the consequence that you decide on.
And that really flows into the second warning sign, because the second warning sign is that the unfaithful doesn't prioritize or support the betrayed partner's needs. So we're kind of on a course here. So, what does not prioritizing or supporting the betrayed partner's needs look like?
The unfaithful doesn't consider their partner in decision making, doesn't collaborate, just makes decisions and goes on with them. May see them as personal decisions and not a couple's decision. Frankly, if you're in a good, healthy coupleship, you're always talking about what these decisions are going to be. So that's really important. So if the unfaithful is not collaborating and not considering the betrayed, that's a red flag in this. If the unfaithful prioritizes their plans over the betrayed's, eek, that's just, well, that just says it right there. The unfaithful disregards or doesn't express empathy or concern regarding their betrayed's feelings, concerns, and worries. We're talking about empathy, compassion here. If you disregard your partner or don't express empathy, like you might acknowledge, oh, yeah, okay, I get that. But if you're not expressing empathy and concern, oh, wow, that must really hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can see why you would be worried about that. That's a really vital part. If you're not doing that, you're really disregarding them. You're just kind of checking a box and nodding. If the unfaithful doesn't make time for the betrayed or the relationship, the we, as Sharon and I call it, if you don't make time for it, what's changing? That has to become the focus of our lives as unfaithful, is our partner and the coupleship.
Because when the unfaithful doesn't do this, I guess would be the best way to say it. I mean, it goes without saying that the betrayed is going to feel unimportant, disregarded, okay? And there is a loss of trust and safety, easy. But the part I want to focus on in there is there's a form of disconnection there, right? It's an alarming disconnection for the betrayed.
Right.
Wouldn't you?
And it's a self-protection. So if we as unfaithful are disregarding our partner, how can they safely stay connected? They're gonna disconnect to protect themselves.
And we as unfaithful wonder, why have our betrayed partners pulled back? Well, because you keep trampling over their boundaries, you keep disrespecting them, and they have to. And anybody like you and I, who's a helper, who's helping them, is going to actually encourage them to pull back and focus on themselves. So we unfaithful are just shooting ourselves in the foot, and it doesn't have to be that way. So if the unfaithful is not prioritizing or supporting the betrayed's needs, and we have a moment where we go, okay, you make a good point. How can they get back on the horse? How can they just go find a horse? Because they've obviously not been riding on the horse of support.
We ask. So this is not just ask our partner, it's ask ourselves, right? Ask ourselves, what does our partner need? What does our betrayed need in their recovery from me right now? And that's going to be partly shown in the boundaries that hopefully
Right.
have listed out now, right?
Perfect spot for it. Exactly.
So you have to also consider that. So asking yourself first, because something is going to upset the partner a lot, is always asking, what was that boundary? What were those boundaries? Yeah, absolutely. I'm big on asking our partner what they need. And if they've told us again and again and again, we might want to ask ourselves first so that we're
Mm-hmm.
not just relying on them. So that's part of taking responsibility is asking ourselves and being clear on that. I do want to say on that disconnection piece, that's a key piece. If you as an unfaithful feel your partner disconnecting, ask, what is he or she protecting? Right? Why are they not feeling safe? Is there anything that I've done or am not doing that I need to look at? So that's really helpful, because then we feel that disconnection, like you said.
Well, it goes without saying too, at some level, but we're going to say it. I mean, they have to get help. There's so many unfaithful that think that they can white knuckle it and I know what we need. We just need to do this. Anytime an unfaithful male or female says that to me, I'm like, ooh, child, I should just refund your money today and we should not ever meet again. Because if that's your position, we're in trouble, right? So, isn't there an inherent responsibility of the unfaithful to do whatever they can to find finances, to get help, to get therapy, coaching intensives, or whatnot?
Yeah, partners didn't cause this. So we have to be serious about ponying up to help them in any which way we can. Therapy, intensives, a retreat. We also have to be willing to do what is best for, so if it's a therapeutic separation, that's, and hopefully that has to be guided, right? Otherwise, it's not therapeutic. If it's just a separation, it's a prelude to divorce. If it's a therapeutic separation, it's guided, it's set up, it's structured. There's therapy and coaching to be done on both sides and so on. Committing to going through the process that's going to help our partners work through their trauma. So that would be at the very least a formal disclosure. We're really good at these, bit by bit trickle truth disclosures that are not formal. And guess what they do? They harm our partners more. They harm our relationship more. They can outright destroy both.
And they
So,
just re-traumatize. I mean, we'll call it like we see it. It just re-traumatizes the betrayed partner time and time again. So I love that you're mentioning that. Isn't there a point too where we have to understand it? Are you listening to the betrayed? That's the bottom line. I hear so many betrayeds who will tell me, and they'll also tell their unfaithful, you're just not listening, right?
so actively listening to our betrayed's concerns and collaborating on solutions that work for the benefit of you as a couple. So obviously to the benefit of the betrayed, but also the benefit of the couple, as long as a solution is what's being asked for, right?
Yeah,
So you might want to check in on that because a lot of times betrayeds just want to be heard. And that may be
absolutely.
that's all that they want right then. That said, if there is a solution that you can collaborate on and they are wanting that, your betrayed is wanting that, collaborate on it. You have to actively listen. So active listening, as we've talked about before, is asking questions. Listen, hear it, say, okay, I hear this. Can you clarify that? Or does that mean, or I'm perceiving that as this? That way you're actively listening, you're gathering more information, but you're also getting what your partner's perspective truly is, because we all run out of our own sort of colored lenses, our own perspective. We have to be able to get our partner's perspective so that we can see reality.
So if there's a betrayed and he or she is like, well, I really want them to support me and prioritize what I want, but it's not working. I mean, what suggestions do you have for the betrayed?
First, remember that you deserve a relationship that is repairing, it's recovering, it's healthy, and ultimately fulfilling. You deserve that. And if you keep that in mind, these boundaries that you're making and enforcing, you get stronger about that. And that's really important to be able to be strong in yourself about these boundaries. Ask your unfaithful for a time to talk calmly, which is important because your unfaithful is they're already working at hopefully being able to stay with you when you're not in a calm space, when you're spiraled out, which is hopefully getting less often. If you're able to pull yourself into a space where you can calmly tell your partner what your needs are and that you need them to hear you and work with you to make things happen, that's going to be heard much more easily, and then things will happen in a positive way.
And if they don't listen, that's where boundaries come in, and we're back on the good, healthy cycle of I need you to listen. If not, here's a boundary. You're still not listening. Here's more boundaries because
Uh,
I deserve to be heard. I deserve to be listened to.
what a key piece you have there to set a boundary surrounding being heard. That is massive.
The last one, the third warning sign, and this is my favorite because I think this one is my favorite, but it's actually one of the easier ones for an unfaithful who really means business. At least for me, when I was looking at this, I was like, if the unfaithful really mean business, this is probably the easier one. And so that is the number three warning sign is if the unfaithful doesn't make the betrayed partner feel valued. So, what does not valuing your betrayed partner look like?
So here's that. How do I treat my betrayed? So
Yes.
if the unfaithful isn't treating the betrayed well, with civility, with compassion, with empathy, granted, I know empathy is a developing thing. If they're not treating the betrayed well, then that means they don't value them. So it's absolutely imperative to do that. All talk, no action, problem.
Yeah.
Because that says, okay, I'm just telling you what you want to hear. Even if we have an intent to do something, if we're not taking that intent and making it actionable, that just sends the message that you're not valued. If we
And
use
we're
the
just checking boxes
yeah,
again.
just checking boxes, absolutely. If we use the harmful communication styles that we outlined a couple of podcasts ago, that immediately tell somebody they're not valued. So passive, passive aggressive, aggressive, and manipulative. Okay. If the unfaithful doesn't listen to the betrayed, and when I say listen, I mean what I just talked about, actively listen. I'm just like, uh-huh, 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 uh-huh. Mm-mm. You're not listening. And that's important for a partner to know that they're being listened to. If we don't actively work to rebuild trust, so being reliable, being trustworthy, being available, being present, all those things that rebuild trust, we need to work at. We're not good at them from the beginning, or we would have been doing them. So it's
Right.
a new thing to learn. If an unfaithful doesn't help the betrayed feel safe and secure, that's a hint and a half right there. Also, if they don't try to connect. So this might take some time because avoiding connection or finding safety in disconnection, as we are wont to do, is very, very common. It also goes back to some much bigger issues from much earlier on in life that we're going to have to overcome. So it may not be, oh boy, I'm so good at connecting right off the bat. It's the trying, the working at it. If that's absent, then there's a problem. Doesn't show gratitude. Look, this is again, I'm going to say it again. Remember, this second chance is an absolute sacred gift. I mean, our partners
It's
walked away.
right. We're not talking about algebra two, three, or four. We're talking about pretty easy, simple math here. And I mean, when we don't value our partner, they feel taken for granted, they feel unloved. I mean, they don't feel trust, they don't feel safety. Those are all kind of just normal things. I mean, we as unfaithful sit back and go, "Well, why don't you feel these things?" I told a guy the other day in a session, I said, if you were doing that to me, I wouldn't feel loved or valued or seen or really cared for either. Like it was incredibly harmful the way you said that. And he was like, "Really?" I said, "Beyond a shadow of a doubt, bro." And he was like, I go, "No shame. It's just the truth." So, as an unfaithful sitting here going, "Okay, I want to value him or her. I really want to value my betrayed." What can they do?
Remember, it's not about just changing your behaviors. The behaviors are important. It's how you treat your betrayed. You have to consider impact versus intent. You
I
may have
love that.
all the, yeah, you may have all the wonderful intent in the world, but if it doesn't land right, it means nothing. So you
I
have to
love it.
consider how you're going to do something or say something, how you're going to interact, how you're going to work on your reactions so that you can be in that responsive place instead of reactive. All of that, it's about that impact. It's about treating your betrayed well.
Beautifully said.
You have to be proactive. Take steps necessary to get into recovery, support your partner's recovery and your coupleship's recovery. You have to be proactive about it, because if you wait around for your partner to do it all, you're just doing the same thing that you've always done. You cannot wait for your partner to handle everything. That doesn't instill trust or safety or security. So you got to use the healthy communication style we talked about last week, which is, just to outline it briefly, considerate and compassionate collaboration, where you're actively listening and developing shared meaning and goals and uniting against the problem. It's not about changing your partner's mind. You have to be of a one in this, uniting against the problem. You got to do everything it takes to rebuild trust. Changing past actions that were damaging, disrespectful, for instance, being late all the time, which really says, sorry, I'm late. I didn't want to be here. I don't want to be here is a big message. You've got to change all of these things, even little things like that, because they're not little. They send a message. Do everything it takes to help your partner feel safe, and especially not doing the things that make them feel unsafe, like keeping secrets, being defensive, making it all about you, not making amends, and so on. I think a good one here is actively connecting with your betrayed. To do this, you got to set your fears aside. You have to be bold. You have to be able to take those things that can be stultifying, right? They can stop you up. I know you have experience with this, where you just and you just seem like you're stopped up. And it's so, so important to take that next step. Even if you feel like you're looking down into an abyss when you take that step, you've still got to take that step. Because if you don't, everything is going to stay exactly as it is or worse. I'm going to say the gratitude piece again. Show gratitude, not only for what your betrayed does, but for who she or he is. And importantly, for giving you the grace to learn how to do this differently.
I think it's a great point. And that transitions into the betrayed. What can the betrayed do when they are feeling unvalued, or like it's just, no matter what I do, Sam, no matter what I do, James, I don't feel valued? So what are some practical things they can do?
You have to let your unfaithful know when you feel like you aren't being treated with dignity, respect, and love. Compassion and empathy are in that. If you tell them, now there's no excuse to either not treat you with those things, or to ask questions about how am I coming across that it's not with dignity, respect, and love. For a partner being proactive in their own recovery work, so important. And often a betrayed partner is going to say, but they caused it. Why do I have to do this work? And it's a really good question. Why do you have to? You shouldn't have to. Look at it this way. Soldiers, they come back, but they don't get over their PTSD because they came home, right? Because you survive a car wreck doesn't mean you're not injured and have to do the physical therapy for that. So it's the same thing. You have been deeply, deeply, deeply traumatized, and you deserve to heal. And guess what? You're unfaithful, as much as, no matter how much we want to, cannot fix all of the damage that we've done. And that's a really sad, difficult thing for you. So please, please seek the help you deserve. I'm going to say this: do not settle for a lesser boundary than you have set. Unless you've given it consideration with somebody and talked it through and said, okay, that maybe I set that bar too high or too strong. Okay, that's reasonable, with help, for me to relax that. Don't forget, you set these for your own sanity, your own safety, your own health. Sticking with them shows yourself that you value you and you will not be devalued by anybody else. Lastly, ask for what you need from your recovering unfaithful. Affirmation, time, space, love, empathy, compassion, being real. You can ask for all of those things. And as an unfaithful, if I'm hearing that from Sharon, I'm taking notice and I'm going, wow, how am I not doing that? Where do I need to do that? By how am I not doing that? I mean, in what ways am I not doing that? How can I do that better?
I think there's so much, as usual, in today's podcast. And I want to take a moment to talk to you, Unfaithful. Whether you're watching just in audio or in video, I just want to tell you this may be really frustrating for you for a variety of reasons. James and I have been there. We understand it. I'm going to tell you that you're probably not going to be able to do these three things without help. I don't know if that comes from us. I don't know if you're getting help from someone and they're not helping you do these three things. I want you to really hear me. No disrespect to whomever you're working on, but you got to reevaluate what you're doing because these three things are such easy yardsticks to be able to use to look at your recovery. If whoever you're working with isn't teaching you these things, well, take them into your session and say, look, teach me these things. Go watch this podcast. Help me do this. Because this stuff doesn't come easy, but it is possible. It is absolutely possible. And if you want help, if we can help, by all means, reach out to us. You can email us at asktheunfaithful@gmail.com. Remember, we do not do coaching or therapy over email, but we might be able to make some suggestions if you want to know about how to work with me or how to work with James or how to do an intensive. We can answer all of that, and we usually get back to you pretty quickly. If you would like to leave a comment or subscribe, please do that. As we say goodbye, look, you're not alone. You're really not. There's help for you. There's help available for you that it would surprise you. Wouldn't you agree, James, that sometimes it's surprising that when we get the right person in the right pathway, how quickly we can actually gain ground as unfaithful?
It's amazing. My wonderful therapist, Dana, who passed away this last March, she is so responsible for me having gained so much ground. Obviously, yeah, I did the work, but she had so much wisdom. I miss her terribly. And we can, with that right help, the leaps and bounds we can make are amazing.
And look, I can say in my own recovery, I mean, I had to do the work, but I would be nowhere if it wasn't for so many people that found me early on and said, you're kind of an idiot, but something about you makes me want to help you. So I'm going to help you. I had free help and I had a ton of help that I had to pay for. And you know what? It was all worth it. Every single conversation, every tough time, it was all worth it. So, you unfaithful, we're here for you. There's people out there that want to help you, but you have to do the work. Nobody will do the work for you. And for you, betrayed, I hope that these three warning signs have helped you. If we can help you, by all means, reach out. By all means, I mean, James and Sharon do intensives just for betrayeds. That might be something that you need. You may need to work with someone like me to help you walk through it. If you're going through a divorce or if you're divorced, that's really hard. We know, we understand, we help people walk through the divorce process all the time. As I end today, I just want you to know you're not alone. You are absolutely not alone, and there's hope for you. So we'll see you next time on Ask the Unfaithful.